How do I ease my fear in public speaking? That is a question that a lot of people have asked me over the last several years. I wrote the book, Speak With No Fear. It's the top rated book in the world on the subject. I lead courses. I have other books. There's so much. But today I'm going to give you 4 different actions, 4 different thoughts, 4 different ideas for you on how to ease your anxiety in speaking and really any upfront leadership. So let's dive in.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, 2 companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Welcome to my YouTube and podcast. I'm Mike Acker. I do a one-shot, no-edit show. That means that if I flub, I flub. If I get stuck, I get stuck. And that's partly to model leadership and real-time speaking to you, that you don't have any chance to go back and improve. You don't have a chance to redo. You just go for it. So today, I want to talk about easing anxiety in leadership and in speaking. There's all kinds of different ways that we ease anxiety, but I'm going to walk you through 4. Now, this came through what I was doing with my small group last night. Once a month, I host a small group of professionals, kind of a cohort, and we walk through different topics and they have a chance to practice it. I can't reshare the video that I took from our small group. That's part of the courses that I do. But ultimately, I can re-go through the content that we talked about to help you. Really, ultimately, this is towards the speaking. But as you know on this show, speaking and leadership go hand in hand. And so what we're talking about here really is relevant in all of your leadership. So I hope that you have a pen and paper, and I hope that you have some time to think through how to enact what I'm going to talk about today. This is great if you're on Zoom, but it's also great if you're in person. This is great if you're getting ready for a high-level interview, like one of the people I was working with yesterday. This is also great if you're getting ready for a large event, like one of the people that was part of the small group went to yesterday. So this is really relevant in any area of speaking and leadership. 4 different ways for you to ease fear, to ease anxiety when it comes to speaking and leadership. Now, before I dive into these, I do want to give this caveat right here. This is based on everything else that I do. And I have the course that runs through identity and messaging and skills, and I have books and everything. So this is not to replace my books, but this is to add to it. So here's the first one. The first one is this: practice off stage so that you're ready on stage. Again and again, when I work with people, I'll tell them, here's the different things that you can do to ease your anxiety. Let me give you an example. Breathe. We all know that breath is life. I actually did a YouTube podcast about this quite a while back with an amazing instructor named M.A. And M.A. and I talked about the power to breathe, and we gave some breathing exercises. I've coached people how to breathe. I've coached singers and athletes and all kinds of different people how to breathe. I've even recorded myself teaching people and doing the count of breathing so people can use it when they're in my courses, to use it to learn how to breathe. Now, we know breathing is important. However, if you look up how to get better and overcome fear of speaking online, you'll actually hear some things that say breathing is not one of them. Why is that? It's because they don't know how to do it as part of their off-stage rhythm. So when they come on stage, they do this. All right, well, here's what I want to do today. I was going to talk about. Try that right now. Take a deep breath and start talking. It does not ease your anxiety. You're actually tighter, and you have all this bent up energy, and it comes out, and then that's going to mess with your focus. The problem is people don't know how to breathe. So if you learn how to breathe and practice breathing well off stage, then when you're on stage, breathing is just part of your regular rhythm. It's just part of what you do. A lot of times, this simple strategy of breathing to release some of your anxiety and fear becomes cumbersome, but it's because you haven't been doing it off stage. See, if you practice a lot off stage, Then you can come on stage and you'll be ready for it. You'll be ready to do it. Another thing I talk about this, and I talk about this in my workbook on Speak with No Fear, is making sure that you practice dirty. And the idea is that often what we do when we practice is that we talk to somebody over here and we say, here it is, I'm giving the presentation. This is great. Here I am giving the presentation. Don't you like my presentation? And then we go on stage and all of a sudden people are looking back at us, or we have empty Zoom rooms, or whatever the situation might be. Now we're in a less sterile environment. So you're not going to be able to speak or lead in a sterile environment. So don't practice in a sterile environment. So much of my strategy, Imagine the Worst, is all about this idea of practicing dirty. So practice off stage in a dirty environment because you're going to be performing in a dirty environment. Practice off stage breathing so that you can perform on stage breathing. Practice off stage identity anchors so that you can perform on stage being anchored. Practice off stage impromptu and interview questions, putting yourself on the spot so that you can perform on stage with being put on the spot. So important for you to practice off stage what you want to do on stage. Now, this doesn't mean just going through a speech. It doesn't mean just going through an agenda. It really means practicing all the things that come with good public speaking, like smiling and enunciation and pauses and your cadence, everything that goes with it, everything that I coach, everything that you could read about, everything that's in books, practicing that off stage so you're ready to do it on stage. So that was one of the things that we walked through. And then afterwards, the small group had a chance to put to practice some of what we were talking about and give a speech. So one of our veteran students went through and gave a fantastic speech. I love what she did. And then we gave a response. After that, I came up with a second different tip that I was talking about last night, which is this. Listen to the expert, not your feelings of what the non-experts say. Another way to say this is listen to the expert, not the audience, and not what you think the audience is saying. So often we give into this fear of what people might be saying about us. Oh, they might be critiquing this. They might have gotten lost here. They might not like how I dressed. They might not. Now, you don't know, but you're reading the room, and often we read the room poorly. We read the room, and then we jump to conclusions about this. Think about it this way. If LeBron James saw you playing basketball and said, man, you got an incredible shot. What incredible form you have. Okay, you'd be pretty stoked. And then afterwards, you went out and you were playing basketball in front of some high school students. And all of a sudden you thought, your insecurity stoked as a middle-aged guy, and you thought, oh my gosh, what do they think about my form? Now you have no idea what they think, but all of a sudden you have this insecurity of someone that you're performing in front of, and you wonder what they think about you. Now, whose voice should you listen to? The inaudible voice, the feelings that you have of these people who may or may not be judging you, or the expert? Obviously, you should listen to the expert. If LeBron James says you got a great form, you got great form. You got incredible form. If he says you got great form, you got amazing form. So ultimately, when you speak, get professional feedback, and there's all kinds of coaches that you can hire, or get feedback from someone who does it very well, and listen to their feedback, not the supposed feelings of the audience that you talk to. So listen to the expert, not the non-expert. Listen to the expert, not the feelings of what the audience may or may not say. Now, if the expert says, you do this poorly, you need to correct this, then guess what? You need to do this differently. If the expert says, you do this great and don't stop, then guess what? Don't worry about what people say about that. The expert already told you, you do this really well. I was working with one client and she was very insecure about one of the areas of her communication. And after I listened to her in a couple different sessions, I said, that is not an issue at all. It's not something you should be worried about. It doesn't detract from what you are doing. Don't worry about it. So we come into the next session and she seemed more at ease. And I said, what's going on? It had been about a couple of weeks since we'd worked together. And she said, I took your words to heart. In other words, she believed in the expert. And I figured if you didn't think it was a big deal, I wouldn't think it was a big deal either. So listen to the expert, not your feelings of what the non-experts might be saying. Listen to the expert, not the audience. Here's a third area. do it the right way. For you to have greater confidence, do it the right way. If you show up, I was just talking to a gentleman and we were doing this consultative call, kind of a sales call going into maybe one of my programs. And he said, I never prepare and I'm always nervous. And I said, you have every right to be nervous. I mean, if you don't prepare, you shouldn't be confident in what you're doing unless you have the skills and the history and you've said this kind of stuff 1,000 different times. But you really shouldn't. Like, if you go into a test and you don't know the subject material of American history and you didn't prep and you didn't study, then you should feel very insecure about your ability to perform well on that test, right? Makes sense. Likewise, if you don't know the skills, if you don't know what to do in front of people, it makes sense that you have anxiety. It makes sense because you don't know how to do it right. But once you know how to do it right, then you have more confidence. When I was in college, I was a painter. So I was one of those college painters in high school, actually. So back it up, 14, 15 years old, my dad started having me paint houses. And I didn't know what to do, so I lacked confidence. But after doing it for a while, I joined a painting team when I was 16 years old, a painting outfit. And we'd go into people's houses. And I mean, they're paying me, I don't know, minimum wage or something. And they're charging probably $30 an hour for my minimum wage. So good business tactic on that leader. But he was able to charge those because he knew that I knew what I was doing. He knew that I could do it right. And so that gave him confidence in me. If you do it right, you have confidence. So if you know how to articulate, if you know how to organize your thoughts, if you know how to prepare, if you know how to keep people's interest, if you know how to get your audience engaged, the more you know how to do things right and the more you practice them right, then the more confidence you have. One of my clients, I don't do a lot of work with kids, but I love this kid. He's 10 years old and he's a child piano prodigy, in my opinion. I don't know if that's the official term, but man, he is amazing. You can find him all over the internet. His name is Tyga. And as I work with Tyga, he gave this speech to me because we're getting ready for his speech. He's already amazing in piano. And in his speech, he talks about the 5 INGs. And one of them is practicing perfectly. And I absolutely agree with what he talked about. That's not practice that makes perfect, but it's perfect practice that makes perfect. The more you do it right, the more confident you are going to be when you perform. In the case of Tyga, he's performed for huge audiences on NPR and on, I think, the largest TV station in China, something like that. So all kinds of different amazing places. But the more that you practice perfectly, the more that you know how to do it right, the more confidence that you should have in front of people. And then lean into, I know what I'm doing. So don't let your thoughts take you astray. Instead, remind yourself, no. I know what I'm doing. I know how to do this. I know how to give the speech. I know how to answer the interview questions. I know how I can do this. Often our anxiety and our insecurity and all of our stress comes from this mental loop that's going on in our mind that's telling us that we don't know what we're doing and what do we think, who do we think we are to be able to say this, and we're not good enough, and imposter syndrome and da. Correct your thoughts with right actions. Ultimately, actions lead to emotions and action leads to thought. Have you ever done something really well and thought, man, I'm great. I did that really well. I should be recognized. I should be rewarded. I scored that goal, or I performed that piece, or I lost those weight, or whatever it is. When you do something well, you go, man, I did that well. Well, the more that you do your public speaking well, and the more that you do it right, the more reason you have for confidence in your communication. And then the last one that I walked through with the group is this: go back to the strategies. Go back to the strategies. And that was in direct reference to this book right here, Speak With No Fear. I just released a second edition of this book here, where I just went through and revised it. But between the two editions, it's got something like 550 reviews on Amazon, and it's been translated into other languages. And I talk about 7 strategies. And I do this for other podcasts, so you can listen to me talk about it, or you can pick it up for fairly inexpensive right now on Amazon. But here's what I talk about. When I talk about strategies, is there are strategies that you can take. Here's what a lot of people do when it comes to reading. They read the book and then they're done with the book. They don't enact the book. But knowledge without action isn't really knowledge. And so if you know something but you don't do it, if I know how to, paint a house, but And it's just ethereal information. Like, okay, this is what you do with a brush. If I know how to do it, but I haven't ever done it, do I really know how to do it? No, because there's more than just mind knowledge. There's more than just being, oh yeah, I assent to that. It's actually something that has to get worked out into experience. Someone who's fresh out of college doesn't know how to program the same way that someone who's been programming for 20 years knows how to program. Someone who has led while they're in high school doesn't know how to lead at a level of a CEO. It's very different. There's experience, and experience really does matter. So when you take one of these strategies like You Be You, or It's Not About You, or Channel the Power, don't just read a strategy and go, okay, that's good, I should do that. But take it and master the strategy. So I wrote a workbook, and at the end of the workbook, I say, rate yourself on the different strategies of overcoming fear of speaking. Rate yourself. And then choose the one that's at the bottom and work on that until you can get it to the top. And then choose the one that's on the bottom and work on it until it gets to the top. And I come back to this idea of it's not about how much we accumulate quantity. It's how well we do what we know how to do, quality. Years ago, I was in this read one book per week. And I would do that. Every single week, I read an entire book. And I read all the big types of books that you're supposed to read. So these weren't like little booklets. I was reading good to great type books. And every week, I would read, not listen, I would read a book. Sit down 5 a.m. in the morning a couple times a week and just power through. And then Fridays was my day off. And I would power through about 5 hours. This was when my son was a baby, and even before my son. And then it started changing. But here's what I learned. Not that much. Yeah, I got some general concepts, and I accumulated a lot, and I did change some, and I did go back to some books, but I don't even remember the titles of some of those books. Now, I have a friend named Jeff Portman, and Jeff Portman told me, and this is years ago, I don't know if he still does this, but for years he would reread the same book called Spiritual Leader by Oswald Sanders every single year. And so he would take this book that had so much in it, and he would really work it through himself. Now, think about that same strategy. You could read lots of books on overcoming fear, or you could pick one like this one and just grab one strategy and really master it, and then do it again and again and again. Master the next one, master the next one, master the next one. So it's not about how much information you've heard, but it's how well do you really know good information. So take the strategy of the second edition and just work your way through it with a workbook, or pick some other book by some other author and work your way through it. There are some great books out there, like Carmine Gallo. He's got, I think, the best-selling book on public speaking. Check that out. Master it. Read it and read it again and again and again. Go back to the strategies. Go back to the starting point. Now, these are 4 different ways to ease anxiety, ease fear. I do other things as well, and I have my framework of confidence communication. I have all the different things I do. I have courses, and you're always welcome to reach out to me about that. But take a hold of what I said today and embrace it and lean into it. If you're looking for other ways, you can always talk to a doctor if your anxiety is intense, if your depression, if your stress is intense. You might want to go to a doctor. Or one of the things I do from time to time to take off the edge of my stress is I'll take a supplement. So I take Pure Calm Plus, and it's something that's just brand new, available. I'll put the link inside the notes as well. Ultimately, in all of this, take action. Whether it's one of the ones I told you today, whether it's a book from Peter Andre, whether it's a book from Carmine Gallo, whether it's some other course or Dale Carnegie, take action and keep taking action until it's not just something you're familiar with, but it's something you master. Thanks so much for being a part of today's podcast and show. I believe that this will be helpful as you do what we talked about. So take a moment and subscribe, like, review, share with somebody, pass this on to somebody who could use some leveling up in their confidence. Until next time, I'm Mike Acker.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.